Hello and welcome to the Minority Arts Appreciation Society podcast, where we're ticking all the boxes. And, we're going to try to not fanny about too much of the preamble, as we are not Lionel Messi. We got to just pass the bloody podcast.
That would have been so much better if you said we're not Bill Burr, and I hate you for that.
Oh, you're right. Okay. Well, I accept this loss. Today we're discussing two brand new albums. One of them is kind of us catching up with 2019 because we didn't get to talk about it. But we're going to be talking about Richard Dawson's 2020 and Dan Deacon's Mystic Familiar. So before we start, we have a guest in this episode. Fenn Waterston, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Fenn. I attempt to terribly do bad music.
Hey, I'm sure you're better than that.
One day when you put something out, you'll get some free publicity from the podcast.
Fuck yeah.
To say thank you. So before we start, Fenn and I were actually talking about this the other week. Well, the new Car Seat Headrest song came out. And me and Fenn thought it was this really odd trend of like band goes away for 5 years, then comes back with like, we're electronic now. And I think what really like made it clear for me is how the music video for that new Car Seat Headrest song is almost identical to the music video for Arcade Fire when they released their first like really, really synthy song. And it's just like the video is just looking at synths like button pressing. Yeah, how do you guys feel about this going electronic?
The song or just going electronic in general?
In general, and also the song.
So, I think going electronic can be, I guess if you feel like you've run out of material just doing like electric guitars and things like that, it can be a good avenue, but it obviously has to come from a similar or like the same level of artistic integrity that you went into when you made just guitar music basically. I think it's hit or miss really. It either really works or really doesn't, and it often surprisingly depends on your sound from before you went electronic. And on the song, it's fine. I think it's fine. But I mean that's kind of a problem.
I was severely disappointed by the song.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like it's fine is far from good enough. Basically, like it just. I was listening to this and I was like getting very close to like on YouTube. You can just like press the right arrow key and it will skip forward 5 seconds. And I was so tempted to just start doing that to see if it got interesting. I didn't, but like I hate that I did that for a Car Seat Headrest song.
For me, this is their worst song in like a decade. Like I can't think of any. I don't even love Teams of Style the most, but I can't think of any tracks from the album that was this boring.
I think my problem with it is usually when people do the going electric, it's because they've run out of ideas. They want to try something new, and when people go going electronic, usually lots of the bands who do it don't have an inkling for good electronic music. Because there's a difference between getting an indie song and throwing a few synths onto it and being like, yep, this is cool, we've got this. And like a true going electronic, which I think is kind of like Kid A, where they actually are very good at electronic music.
That's such a good point, yeah.
And it feels like they really commit, like...
Yeah.
Radiohead completely committed to that. And it wasn't that they didn't know what to do with their sound, it was just that what they wanted to do with their sound couldn't be accomplished with just guitars anymore. It was a necessity, not boredom.
Yeah, Kid A, like, exists in that world. Like, I think it's almost... The strength of Kid A is it's recognizable as a Radiohead album, and that's why the transition feels so natural. But also it is just a completely different experience, I find, and also, like, more powerful in some instances than their older stuff, which, it depends on who you talk to, but has very clear influences and such.
Yeah.
Back on the Car Seat Headrest song, the whole time, I kind of just thought this didn't really feel like a Car Seat Headrest song. Not because of anything really to do with the sound, but just like the lyrics and like were just so uninspired, and like the tone of it, I just had no idea why this was like existing. When me and Josh saw Will live a couple of years ago now, and he did some more like he covered a David Byrne song, I think it was. He came out to a David Byrne song. I mean, that kind of thing, that kind of gives the impression of like a respect for this like area of music. But like it was so generic. It was painful. I just don't understand why it exists.
Yeah, I gotta say that Car Seat Headrest concert is to this day the best concert I've ever been to. It was completely incredible, and Will just sounds bored on this new song. I hope he's okay. I'm worried that he's just like really depressed or something and couldn't have energy in the studio because he sounded so drained, and not in like a good way, like he didn't want to be there.
Yeah, not in the Teens of Denial way, where
Yeah.
it's like actually just like a song of an album he wrote when he was like really depressed at college. This is just like bereft.
It's just boring. Even the instrumentation feels boring. Like, there's a bit at 3 minutes in where you just get a melody on the synth which is just going up and up in a really boring way. It reminds me of All of Me Wants All of You by Sufjan, but kind of somehow very boring.
I was going to bring up Sufjan because I think Sufjan's a really great example of someone going electronic but not sacrificing ambition. So I feel like Age of Odds, songs like the title track Age of Odds, are so epic and exactly the same sort of scope and ambition of an album like Illinois. It feels like nothing was lost in this shift. It feels like he didn't shift to electronic and suddenly he's not interesting anymore. It's still Sufjan. Whereas I feel like with this Car Seat Headrest shift, I feel like we lost something, and I'm really scared that this whole album is gonna feel like this song.
Yeah, I think it has no edge as well, the car seat song. Like, usually large portion of car seat songs are quite edgy in their sounds. They'll have like nasty mixing or distortion stuff, while this is just kind of clean.
Stereo.
Bear, yeah.
One of my problems with lots of like electronic, when people go electronic, is since they're no longer recording stuff, they end up getting the sterile sound because they don't get the sound of the room they're recording, and they lose like the lo-fi edge. And this is the same because the drums and synths just sound dead. They haven't been mixed properly or recorded well.
Totally.
A sad day when none of us like the new Car Seat Headrest song. Yeah, it's like after the 70s, it's okay for Bowie to make some shit albums, you know, like
You didn't have to tell him you could do that 7 times in a row, though.
he wasn't hurting anybody. Anyway, our first review is 2020 by Richard Dawson. This was released in 2019, but we'd thought we'd, wait till the actual 2020 year to talk about it. Richard Dawson is a Geordie, Newcastle-based. What would you classify him as? Like indie folk, but more artist?
I feel like it's 80s folk music, but went prog.
Yeah, I get that vibe. What is your history with Richard Dawson? I'll let Matty go first then, Fenn.
So, I love Richard Dawson very, very much. I've heard Peasant a few years ago when it first came out, and I think I mentioned this on the last episode when Josh said we'd be reviewing this. Like, that is my favorite folk album of the decade. I think it's like just a masterpiece, and every song, every time I listen to it, I get a little bit more out of. Also, Weaver is fucking incredible and puts me in a good mood every time I hear it. Awesome song. So I was going to listen to this album when it came out, but I have only heard it for this episode because I was really scared about listening to it. And yeah, Peasant is just awesome, and I keep talking about it to people who don't give a fuck, which is when you really love something.
Let's see. I listened to Peasant a few months after it came out because a friend from work said his friend had just released an album. Check it out, Peasant. So we're like, yeah, I'll go give this a listen. Like, it's just some guy, a friend of a friend, and then we heard it and we're like, what the hell? This is the best folk album I've heard for a very, very long time.
That's amazing.
It should be noted that Fenn is Geordie himself, so he is in the same way that I met Cosmo Pike at a house party in Peckham. Fenn is in the circles of people who would know Richard Dawson.
That's amazing. I'm so much more excited about Richard Dawson than I am Cosmo Pike.
Yeah, no, Richard Dawson's more impressive.
So yeah, Dawson is my hero, especially because folk, Newcastle, yeah.
Yeah, I like connect with a lot of the stuff in the music because of the English thing, but I feel like it must be another level for you, like the Geordie thing.
It's absolutely hilarious because two halves, he starts singing about King's Priory. That was the school in like the town next to mine, which had the
Whoa.
rivalry. Like,
Yeah, I looked up on the map how long it would take for me to walk to King's Priory, and I noticed it was like an hour-long walk, and it's like the area that Fenn is from. I don't want Fenn to get hunted down and reveal his location. But I mean,
That's
I think
mad.
I think reading the lyrics of this album, I think these themes are pretty universal. I think there are
mm,
some like direct references to areas or people that you might not know if you're American, but overall, I think you'd understand what Dawson's talking about. I don't think it's so esoteric or local that it just wouldn't make any sense.
I mean, it's mostly loads of personal stories, kind of vaguely set in Newcastle to talk about how terrible kind of capitalism is.
It's a microcosm. Yeah, it's a microcosm for the world for sure.
Yeah, it feels like the album version of like I Daniel Blake or
Yeah.
something,
Mm,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like it's the exact
Exactly.
same vibe.
The evil's like it's the same evil across the world. It's just expressing itself uniquely in this specific environment.
Well, I guess now that we've kind of started jumping into it conceptually, overall, what did you guys think about the album?
this is probably my favorite album of 2019, and probably for a few years before that. Well, bar in 2015. I really adore this album. It's very good.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know where this would sit. I think this album needs a bit more time to digest for me, but I'm liking it more and more as I dig into it. I don't know if it can get to the same level of love that I have for Peasant. There's certain things about that album that I will get into that I kind of miss with this, but I'm getting to love this more and more. I'm really curious to know what Josh thinks.
I think I'm in a similar place to Matty. Like when I first listened to this album, I was really struggling with it because I was really enjoying the songwriting and the lyrics and the storytelling. But I think sonically, this is a bit less ambitious or vivid than as Peasant was. And there are lots of songs here where I think if I wasn't paying attention to the lyrics, I would just get a bit bored. Most of the album sounds great, but I wish that more time was spent crafting it sonically to be a bit more colorful, interesting. I understand that in some songs it's intentionally meant to be drab, but even in the 10-minute track Fulfillment Center, I thought that sounded amazing. It was songs like Black Triangle where I didn't understand why it was so long. I didn't think it needed to be an 8-minute long track. But having said that, this is a when you really pay attention to the storytelling, it's really satisfying to listen to, and almost all of the sonic choices made fit with the storytelling. I just think it could have been a bit more ambitious.
Mm,
I get that. I kind of to talk about his storytelling for a minute. I think that's definitely the strongest thing about this album, and I think the reason why is he does it. This album is an encapsulation of society, and he's constantly telling stories from different perspectives. But they're never just like mouthpieces for Richard Dawson. Like the first like song is written from the perspective of a civil servant who does like extremely immoral things that you obviously get the sense that Richard Dawson disagrees with. But like that's the strength of the album. Like in the song Queen's Head, it's that song would be a lot weaker if when he's talking about the butcher spouting racist drivel, the like protagonists of the song went, "Stop being racist, man." It's like what makes that song so strong and such a powerful encapsulation of like modern racism is the people do nothing, and then go on to see their neighbors that they have never said a word to. So as well as tackling racism, he's also just like perfectly, and this is more of a local thing, perfectly getting right like English culture and why we're such a and why specifically our society is rife for the specific racism that we have. And yeah, I think that like lack of sympathy that he has for he has sympathy for some of the voices on the album, obviously, but that lack of sympathy means that we get a real understanding of just horror that everyone is in. Like even that
Mm.
civil servant that I brought up before, they're in a horrible position, and the song is written so upbeatly, and the chorus is so anthemic. But that's just like almost it just creates this feeling of like hysteria. It's horrible, and you feel like more sorry for them in a way. It's incredible.
I mean, I don't think there's a single kind of positive story. There's like these horrible things happen, and then kind of they try and see the beauty in it, and like, but yeah, nothing is very positive. I guess two halves more so.
Yeah, and
Now that I
kind of
think
jogging
about it.
as well. Like jogging's conclusion, it's not perfect, but he's feeling a little bit better by the end of jogging.
With jogging though, I kind of found like it was again that like sense of maniacism of just like taking like it was like he I think that's more of one of the more sympathetic points of view on the album. There's kind of the sense of like, oh, they're just fixate, they don't understand the wider issues, they have quite a quaint take on the wider issues going on in society, and that's where they like fixate on jogging. And the music video as well is just
Mm.
like the person just jogging for like the whole song, and like the way it's edited, it just slowly feels more and more kind of horrible.
I think what's particular about the stories being told is I was trying to think of other artists who tell stories like this that are very like British and down to earth, and I thought about the Streets, but even the Streets has a sort of like rebellious, youthful spirit underneath it. These are just people, like they're just so painfully normal
Real.
and
Mm.
almost dull at points. Like heart emoji, it's just there's nothing romantic about this. There's nothing like particularly exciting about this person's life. This could be anyone you pass on the street, but Dawson makes it so grand in its own right and beautiful and affecting. Like Fresh as Board, just this dad who's dropped his kid off and is worried about his kid at uni, and but it's one of the saddest songs I've it's a really beautiful aching track, and I think that again, when you really pay attention to the album, it really rewards you for paying attention.
Mm.
That song fucking hits hard.
I think my favorite thing about the album is kind of how he's not trying to be this poetic monster who thinks he's Oscar Wilde, like
Mm,
spitting out verses which will represent aesthetics. Like there's so many lines when you read throughout. You're like, these lines are kind of just not poetic at all, but he kind of makes them work because they're just storytelling and fit very well. Like most of Joggin is like that.
When you compare this to someone like Sam Fender, he's trying to do a very similar thing of making political songs about Newcastle, but they come off as so preachy and disingenuous. And look at me, I'm very woke. Uh,
Hmm.
Whereas Dawson, like Matthew said earlier, he's not coming off that way at all. It's just very genuine, heartfelt, and just genuinely thinking about the people living in this area and considering
Yeah.
what everyone is going through.
and that's when you get the most effective commentary, when you have that kind of like almost this album is not clinical. There's a very like specific warmth to Dawson songwriting. I find I can't quite put my finger on why, but I think it's just its quaintness. The sterility he treats all of the perspectives with means that like you're kind of just given a real insight into the layers of things, and the contrast that certain things have as a result of that, like in Dead Dog in an Alleyway, where he's just talking about like very blankly like Nando's, and then like a horrible alleyway and being and having like this shit kicked out of you because you're homeless and that's just what
Mm.
happens to you. That that contrast is only achieved because he just sings about them quite matter of factly, other than the emotion in his voice.
I feel like this is going to be very pretentious, but it reminds me of like a trend in like postmodern fiction where you read like a Pynchon or David Foster Wallace thing, and because usually it's a thing in like modern songwriting poetry, like you can't mention Nando's. That's not poetic. That's not cool. You have to come up with some grand metaphor for it instead of just saying what it is. Yeah, and it comes off as very honest when he is actually singing about Nando's and being homeless. like if someone who's genuinely homeless, like, and was writing their perspective, they're not going to censor out like Nando's. They're not going to come up with some grand metaphor. It's just Nando's.
Yeah, I think this album would have been great as like a London Road type movie, like a musical about British people, and we just jump from person to person to see everyone's life. Anyway, I'm gonna ask you both individually, what were your three favorite tracks? What was your least favorite track? And overall, would you recommend the album?
Okay. So first off, Dead Dog in an Alleyway. Like the chorus on that song is so beautiful, but also heartbreaking as a result, just because of the content of the song. Um, and it really, when I listen to that song, I have the same feeling that I get when I walk out, with like when I'm like on a nice evening out with my family and I pass by a homeless person, and you just have that instant feeling of guilt and that everything around you is just bullshit, which I think is something this album does so well. Just that feeling of just the reality of life and just kind of how horrible everything really is once you realize it. Second up is Fulfillment Center. The thing that this sort of encapsulates perfectly, like the difference between this and Peasant. It's so much more direct when he starts singing about just the awful things, that happen in this song, and also in the real Amazon distribution centers that he's singing about. It really brings the horror home and represents just why this album is the way it is. It's because the situation now feels horrible for the world, and this is a song about that. And then finally, probably Two Halves. I think Two Halves is kind of a more lovely song, in a way. But like the music video is fantastic, by the way, really cool, and like stop motion animation that kind of reminds me of Nightmare Before Christmas. But then I guess the thing about that song is its quaintness contrasted against songs like The Queen's Head and Jogging, just kind of makes it feel more depressing in a way. Like this like dying tradition of like football, is becoming like so much less wholesome in a country and a world that just feels like it's going downhill. And there's just a horrible irony to the warmth of that song that is really interesting. My least favorite track, I like it. I do like it. But Heart Emoji, I just find the instrumentation of that song a bit less interesting. And the story is good, and there's a really like funny twist at the end. But yeah, I think I just find the sonic nature of that song a bit less interesting than the other ones. Yeah. Yeah, I would wholeheartedly recommend this. It's awesome. It's kind of like I said before, I would say it's missing these really charming acoustic guitar sections of Peasant. But I think this isn't an album for that time. Not that everything was great in 2015. I very much don't believe that. But the what he replaces those sections with is so much more worth it, and that's this sense of energetic like hysteria and maniacism that really captures the desperation and loss of hope that we have right now. It's an awesome album. Check it out.
Awesome. Fenn, how about you?
Okay, three favorite tracks. Okay, definitely my first has to be Two Halves. This is definitely my favorite song on the whole album. It's so amazing. The the lyrics are funny and fit the story completely. Like I still adore the line "Stop fannying around, keep it nice and simple. You're not Lionel Messi, just pass the bloody ball." It's got the catchiest melody I think on the whole album, bar maybe Dead Dog.
The hook is
Um,
awesome. Yeah.
yeah, both of them. Like I feel the verse is even quite catchy, and then the chorus, the music video again. Yeah, I'm kind of just repeating what Matt had already said, but it is really that good. Also, there's a really good bridge between where it goes really quiet before he does a really high falsetto bit, and it shows kind of my favorite thing about his songwriting of how varied it is. How it's not just verse chorus verse chorus. He does these really weird kind of prog like bridges and variations. Then my other favorite song has to be, well, second has to be Dead Dog in the Alleyway. Again, it's just incredibly catchy. Like it's like the most emotive song I think probably on the album. And then I really like Joggin'. It's the one song which goes a lot further with its lyrics and story writing, but in which it's longer, but it's kind of weird, not stream of consciousness, but just lots of random thoughts that kind of tell a picture of kind of just hopelessness in, well, not Newcastle, just anywhere. Like there's the line which is really sad. There's a Kurdish family on the ground floor, had a brick put through their window. The police know who did this, still they do nothing, which is just a
Barren.
very honest reality. And then the whole bits about antidepressants and beta blockers.
It's definitely the most like I think directly political song on the album.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole album is very political.
Oh,
Definitely.
for sure, yeah.
It's like 80s Labour kind of thing, I think. Least favourite. I struggled with this. I was going between either Fulfillment Centre or Black Triangle, but it probably has to be Black Triangle. Yeah, so Black Triangle is probably it, definitely. It doesn't have the catchiness. It doesn't have, like, in Peasant, there's moments where it's not catchy, but they're really cool sonically, and they'll go in a loud breakdown and stuff will just go mental. While Black
Yeah.
Triangle just doesn't, and it's a very long song, and it doesn't have like the emotion of Fulfillment Center or some of the other interesting bits.
It's a bit of an outlier. It is.
Yeah, like it's definitely the weakest song, in my opinion, at least.
Oh, and would you recommend the album?
Yes, I do a lot, but I know lots of people really hate it.
Really?
I've shown this album and other Richard Dawson song to so many people who've just told me to turn it off. What is this medieval whatever?
Oh man, that sucks. I mean, I can see that happening. Oh, I showed a few peasant songs and two halves to a friend of mine like a couple of days ago, and they were really into it. Oh, that sucks.
It's just one of those. It's very weird music. If it just doesn't sound like much else, especially peasant being like medieval folk.
I do forget about. I think I definitely forget about that with peasant. It's just really off the beaten path.
But yeah, definitely recommend it.
What about you, Josh?
So for my three favorite tracks, I'm gonna go with first up, "Jogging." I think this is clearly the standout of the album. It's the emotional centerpiece of the whole album. It's probably my favorite song, just from a composition standpoint. It's just extremely satisfying and enjoyable to listen to. I think again, seeing a protagonist dealing with anxiety and attempting to run to mitigate it, and worrying about things like becoming redundant at work and just missing their old job. It's so incredibly heartfelt and such a genuine way to look at everyday people. Yeah, that is just a huge standout for me, and insanely enjoyable to listen to as well. I think another favorite of mine was Fulfillment Center. I think this depressing 10-minute long ode to Amazon workers like should be what this album is iconic and famous for. It's such a bold track and statement, and I don't think it's must be the first concept song about Amazon workers, right? But it does it so well. I love the robot voice telling everyone to increase productivity. It reminds me of like Daft Punk's Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, but in like a dystopian, sad Newcastle setting.
Yeah.
And Dawson's voice is just incredible in this one. It's really raw and emotional, and there's distance from the characters he's talking about, but because it's like kind of a bird's eye view, but it's still just as heart wrenching. And I think my last favorite track would be Freshest Bore. I love the pretty opener to this track. It's some of the nicest guitar on the album. And it's just a story about a father dropping his daughter off at Leeds, I assume Leeds University, and missing her. You know, it just really feels like a modern She's Leaving Home by the Beatles.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I was literally thinking about this song the whole time.
Yeah, I have some experience of my mum expressing similar feelings of waywardness and worry when I left for uni. So this track was like really emotionally resonant for me. I felt like I was sort of in her head, and the line "the house seemed to hold its breath" is just so gorgeous. My
That song fucks me up. That song fucks me up.
My least favorite track is Black Triangle. I totally agree with Fenn. This song does nothing for me. It's really the part of the album where I mentally check out. I hate that it's the sixth track because it's 8 minutes long. I don't enjoy it, and every time it comes on, I'm just like, I feel like turning the album off because I just don't want to listen to the song. But I know that Performance Center is right around the corner, so I got to hang in there. But yeah, this one reminds me a bit of like King Gizzard at their most meandering and dull with the instrumentation. It just feels middling and plodding. And the story about like a UFO enthusiast who, I guess, his wife leaves him. I don't know. It just didn't do anything for me. I don't really know what he was trying to say with this track. It felt kind of like maybe it was like a Louis Theroux episode. Like, look how weird people can be. But yeah, I didn't really get anything out of that one. Overall, I'd give this a pretty solid recommend. I think there is some unique, breathtaking personal storytelling happening here. There's some real pathos and trembling vulnerability in the vocals. At points, though, I do feel like the album is a tad held back by some uninventive songwriting, just from a composition standpoint, and some uninspiring instrumentals serving as backdrops for these stories. And I think without these stories, I don't know how much I'd return to this album. But taking it as a like masterpiece of storytelling, it is really gorgeous. And again, there are lots of tracks which sound absolutely beautiful, like Jogging, Fresh as Ball, Two Halves. I'm not saying every track sounds bad. I'm just saying at some point it's like Black Triangle. It's when the weaknesses of some of the composition shows itself.
The moments in Peasant which go wild, like the end of Ogre, most of Weaver, the little falsetto melody things. The one problem is the only songs which get close to that are like Dead Dog in an Alleyway.
Yeah, I do know what you mean.
All right, so next up, we're talking about Dan Deacon's Mystic Familiar with a gorgeous, gorgeous album cover. I just really love staring at this album cover and thinking about it. Anyway, do you two have any history of Dan Deacon?
I had no idea he existed until this album came out. And then I saw Fantano gave it a positive review, and I thought I'd check it out.
Okay, how about you, Fenn?
I only heard of it when you posted what the name of it was like a week and a half ago. So, yeah.
Well, okay, I got into Dan Deacon at around sixth form. No, it was right before sixth form. I specifically remember it was the summer before starting sixth form. So school had ended. It was kind of like a weird summer, right? And I remember I was at my dad's, and I spent all my time in my room just listening to albums. I think that's when I discovered lots of the albums I like today. And one of them was an album called Spider-Man of the Rings by Dan Deacon.
Whoa,
Hilarious album title. And it was just a completely kooky, off-the-wall, funny electronic album. For some reason in my memory, because I mainly listened to that when I was 16 and I haven't really returned to it much. But for some reason in my memory, I remembered it not having vocals. But I went back to listen to Crystal Cat and realized, oh, there are vocals. I just only jumped to the bit with the weird sample chipmunk kind of vocaling bit because that was my favorite part. But yeah, Crystal Cat is an awesome song. I highly recommend everyone checks that out. Anyway, so yeah, today we're talking about Mystic Familiar, the brand new album. I think I'll start with my opinion on this album. At first I was pretty blown away. I did not expect Dan Deacon to do something so kind of lush and lavish and really going for grandeur here. I was used to his more comedic side in Spider-Man of the Rings, which kind of it's more akin to someone like Thundercat, like that sense of humor when you watch the music videos and things like that. Whereas this is really going for like something grandiose, especially with like a 4-track suite bang in the middle. I think upon re-listens, however, I still love this album, but I found the lyrics to be really lacking. Lots of them do just feel like generic psychedelic rock lyrics about becoming one of the world and your soul and I don't know, becoming water. And it just all feels a bit flowery in the worst of ways. And I find that, well, I love a lot of the instrumentation. Synth work is amazing. Sometimes it's not as good as it thinks it is, and tracks will kind of meander on for a bit and try to feel kind of spontaneous, but I kind of wish there was more concise songwriting at points. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this album. How do you feel about this, Fan?
Hmm. Oh, so my first impression when I heard it was I was kind of shocked by how grandiose it was. Like, I hadn't heard kind of a synth album that went this hard on it. Like, the first track, Become a Mountain, kind of combining some classical piano with some nice arpeggios, and then you have the really nice hypnagogic in Sat by the Tree. But then the more I listened to it, the more I started to dislike lots of mostly the vocal choices with the lyrics, the vocoder, which I really, really hated, and how the melodies were quite bland, and some songs felt too long, and some songs felt like they were the same song, but just taken one part of it and make it more pronounced.
It is odd. I think one thing that's strange is there's no track here that's longer than the longest. Other than the last track, nothing's longer than 5 minutes, really. Yet there were songs that still felt like did it. Like I don't know. Like yeah, like they just meander. How do you feel, Matty?
I've had like a really up and down experience with this album, like I kind of mentioned before we started recording. At first, I really enjoyed it because, like, ever since Beck like embraced Scientology properly and also embraced making terrible music, I've been needing some stuff that's like quite kind of goofy and kind of unabashedly itself in a way. And this is that definitely, but on subsequent listens, I started to have a few more problems with it than I did on the first listen. I was kind of struggling with like the sheer upbeatness of it. I think just like in the internet age with everything like even happiness being like slightly ironic, it's hard to take songs like Become a Mountain, which are beautiful but like so very optimistic and just like happy. It's kind of like, oh god, overwhelming, I don't know if I can deal with this. So things like that eased over time, but one thing I did find was, yeah, the interpretation can kind of start to blur into each other, which I think is partially intentional, but I think there's like a point where you cross a line of like, okay, kind of what song am I listening to now? Like what phase am I in? And I feel like once you lose that context with a song, you kind of lose a bit of your engagement as well. But I feel like I'm sounding a bit too harsh. There's a lot of really lush stuff that I really like with this album, and I do really appreciate when an album just takes its time, or not takes its time, but makes the effort to just be really grand and not hold back in a way. Yeah. No, this is pretty good. This is like really good, but I just keep going up and down on it.
I think what I find strange about this podcast is I feel like when I'm talking about an album that I really like and everyone else likes it, I come off as way more negative than when I'm like trying to defend a Taylor Swift album that I kind of like ish, because I have to do so much more work to justify the kind of like ish statement.
No, I totally get you.
But here, I mean, I don't want to sound too negative. I think a lot of the positive lyrics almost sound a bit like Fleet Fox's lyrics. It doesn't have the edge or nuance, or frankly, they're not as interesting as Fleet Fox's lyrics, but it has a similar energy of just like loving the earth and wanting to be a part of it, right? And a song like Sat by a Tree, which is one of my favorite pop songs of the year so far, is a great example that your album does not have to be extremely sad to be emotionally evocative. I think Sat by a Tree is a really emotionally powerful track, but it's pure optimism and pure positivity. It's not relying on I'm going to bum you out to make you feel emotion. It just gets there through sheer excess of sound, and it's really fascinating.
The best moments of the album remind me of Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots in that way, where it's like we're gonna go hard emotionally in the paint, but you're gonna feel good, and I'm like, whoa.
So Fenn, what was your favorite tracks? What were your least favorite tracks? And overall, would you recommend the album?
Okay, my favorite track probably has to be Sat by a Tree, just because it's kind of the one that does what the album does best. Like, the vocals, one of my main problems with the album is I really dislike the vocals, the melodies, the vocoder, the tone. in some ways he reminds me of a really weak version of Will from Arcade Fire with the singing. Like, it just doesn't work as well. But Sat by the Tree's got nice synths, like really nice analog sounds. So yeah, I really like that one. I liked Bumblebee Crown King quite a decent amount as well. The synth tones were just really luscious in it. Like, there was some really nice, like, sharp arpeggios in it, and yeah.
And it doesn't
And
hurt that it sounds like a Mario Galaxy song title, right?
I feel like this has got a lot of video game stuff, as you'll see. I wrote a comment about what I felt about my least favorite song. Also, Sat by the Tree is a better version of the song which I picked as my least favorite. But yeah, my third favorite has to be Weeping Birch, I think. Because, yeah, it's just another pretty sounding song with nice instrumentals, but it's more spacey than the other ones. And since I'm not a fan of his vocals really at all, it's nice to have a song where he just does the thing he does well. My least favorite is My Friend by a lot. I really can't stand this song.
Wow.
It feels like a really bad nightmarish reject of Everything Now Arcade Fire song to me for some reason. And it also reminds me of a weird Sonic the Hedgehog extra level, like, riff-off, like, because it's got the gotta go fast beat where it's just pounding, going like, run, run, run. It's like it's chasing me behind in a nightmare. The vocoder is horrible.
Can I ask what's a vocoder?
It's, so you know how you hear, like, someone singing normally, and then they'll use, like, a robot, they'll sound like a robot?
Oh,
Like, the
yeah,
bit
that
for
does
Phil
kind of
Miss and
suck on this album. Yeah, yeah.
And think of, like, Mr. Blue Sky, and where
Yeah, when it
randomly
goes,
sound like,
Mr. Blue Sky. Yeah, I know
yeah,
the bit you mean.
there's loads of vocoder on this album. You like, just why?
I'm just gonna say, I really like My Friend. I think it's really good.
Yeah,
I think
I
it's
was
really nice.
I was gonna say, in defense of My Friend, I think it's perhaps the most interesting track lyrically because there's like other emotions in it, and there's euphoria mixed with like a wistfulness of missing this person, and I love that line at the end about how he doesn't know if they'll have any more good times, but he's grateful for the ones they had, and yeah, I really like that track too. I'm sorry you hated it so much, man.
Yeah,
But would you recommend
Would you
it?
recommend it though?
probably not.
Oh,
At
wow.
first I was like, I like this, and then I just went, no, I really, really dislike this. Like, it on the second and third listen, my opinion like dropped drastically.
R.I.P. Dan Deacon.
Yeah, Ethan.
Ethan. Yeah, so I'll go ahead with mine. So yeah, so for my three favorite tracks, Become a Mountain, gorgeous sweeping pianos that swell as the track opens, and I love the playful Animal Collective-esque childlike vocals. It all just inspires wonder. I think this is an impeccable album opener. It really sets the tone for a lavish and confident, shimmering album. Another favorite track of mine is Sat by a Tree, along with everyone else. It's just a completely euphoric track. It's bright and joyful, and again, a superb example of how to be emotionally evocative through just displaying sheer wide-eyed joy. And honestly, moments of this album like this are really addictive to me. They're like sugar. I get a little bit of a high from them. And the line, "It's a short life and sadly unrehearsed." Yeah, it kind of reminds me a bit of Flaming Lips, like Matty said. It has the same kind of existential dread of that album, but
Yeah.
tinted with sheer kind of euphoria and a high. My other favorite track is Weeping Birch, like Fenn, and I'm really happy that someone else enjoyed this track as I did. I think it's a gorgeous track. I love the tense, driving strings. They sound like something out of an Angel Olsen or Julia Holter or even Waveblood at her best. It's lush and passionate, And my least favorite track is Fell Into the Ocean. I think the annoyance that Fenn was describing about my friend is how I feel about Fell Into the Ocean. I fucking hate the hook when he sings dig deep, the water deep down is safe enough to drink. I fucking hate that shit. I never want to hear that ever again. It sounds like a really bad SpongeBob song. Like, not even a good SpongeBob song, like one from like season 8 or something. Like, this is awful. And this is when his vocals are at their worst and his lyrics are at their most trite, the most saccharine. Yeah, this is just a played out, annoying song. Overall, I give a confident recommend for this album. I think it's thoroughly enjoyable, other than that one track. I think there are some really beautiful tracks there and fantastically uniquely sequenced. It's very satisfying when it all comes together. It's let down by some weak lyricism, and like I said before, sometimes I feel like it thinks it's better than it really is. Like, I think about the suite in the middle, the ARP suite, and if I'm honest, it wasn't as, it's ambitious, but it doesn't really deliver. Like, it's just okay, it's fine, it's really nice, but it's not as epic as you'd hope for, something like that.
It's not Janelle Monáe Arcandroid, basically.
Oh, exactly. Like, the suite at the beginning of Arcandroid is transcendent. Like, it completely owns, right?
It slaps.
But yeah, overall, confident recommend. I think this is a really enjoyable album. Like, we haven't had an Animal Collective album for a while. If you're feeling a bit, you want that kind of similar joy, definitely check this out.
Also,
anyway, that's it. I think we've ticked all the boxes.
I didn't get to do mine.
Mattie, what did you think about this?
I've been kicked out. So I feel like I'm a bit of an outlier here. So for my opinions on the best and worst songs of this album. Okay, so the first favorite song I'm gonna list is "Fell Into the Ocean," motherfucker. "Fell Into the Ocean" is fucking sick, and the part where he's like, "Close your eyes" is nice. Yes, lyrically it's a bit bland, but it's a psychedelic album, and the emphasis isn't that much on the lyrics. Yeah, it's a good song. Woo! And my friend is a good song. My friend sounds nice, and I like it. That is the end of my opinion. And "Far From Shore" is the best song from the suite section. "Far From Shore" is a nice song with some cool ambient sections that don't feel too meandering. Worst song, "Weeping Birch." Fucking meandering ambient bullshit.
Okay, that was the completely reactionary take. You have to.
I said that purely because you guys don't like my favorite songs. No, not really. I think that the most boring, the most bored I get on the album is, like I said, when I'm like, wait, what song is it? Is it over? Where am I? And that's where I am with "Weeping Birch."
I just want to say I left a note saying I hate ARP Free of the Suite. That was the other song I really hated.
Oh no! What is happening? I would recommend this album. I think I'm gonna get more out of it as I listen to it, I think. But again, it could go either way. Like, the variety of opinions we've heard on this podcast is enough to show that anyone should give this a go. And because, you never know, you might get something out of this, and you might hear a song like "Weeping Birch" and have the correct opinion, which is that it sucks, and move on. So yeah.
Well, it does sound like a Waveblood track. Anyway. And I like it.
It sounds nothing like a...
It does. Come on, those strings are so Waveblood.
You're so wrong. You're so wrong.
Alright, whatever, man.
Friendship ended with Josh.
I like Weeping Birch. I think it's really pretty. But yeah, I think that's it. I think we've ticked all the boxes.
All the boxes are ticked.
Mattie, what films, I don't know, plural or singular, are we talking about next week?
We are talking about "Portrait of a Lady on Fire."
Dude, I bought my ticket for that today.
Oh, there we go then. I'm really fired up right now. I'm gonna calm down. Yeah, it looks beautiful. It's gotten rave reviews. And as a big Les, it's really, really nice to see. Even if I go and I don't like the film, it's wonderful to see the particular longing that lesbians have. Especially in the forbidden time of the 18th century being represented on screen. So I'm really excited to just go and see it, and I really want to talk about it at length. So yeah, that's the film. Tune in then in a week's time.
Yeah, I'm super excited too. Like I said, I got my ticket of my own initiative. Like Matthew didn't tell me to buy it because I think I saw the trailer and I was like, yeah, European film with, you know, nice scenery and a romance that's vaguely forbidden. Looks like
Yeah.
Call Me by Your Name. I can't wait to watch this. That's why I'm going. Anyway, yeah, that's it. We've ticked all the boxes, so I'm gonna sign off. See you guys next time. Make sure to watch Portrait. Is it Portrait of a Lady on Fire?
Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
There we go.
And follow us on Instagram, Minority Arts Podcast, _ between every word. You can get updates on what albums we're going to be and films we're going to be talking about. This is both film and album podcast. And make sure to follow us on Spotify as well so you don't miss episodes.
Wonderful. Subscribe if you're on YouTube, I guess, but I don't know.
Do what you want.
You do what you want. We don't care. We don't need. Okay. Well.
Join our MySpace.